The room was quiet when the message arrived. I did not hear it at first. My sister did. Her phone vibrated once on the hospital tray beside her hand. She could not move much anymore, but her eyes shifted toward the screen. I picked it up for her. The message was from our parents. 2 short sentences. No greeting, no question, just this. "We'll come if she actually dies." For a moment I thought I had read it wrong. My sister stared at my face, waiting for me to speak. I did not. Outside the room, machines hummed and nurses moved through the hallway like nothing had changed. But something had. And the people who sent that message had no idea that my sister had already prepared something for them. A video. One they would never forget. The hospital room faced east. Every morning the light arrived slowly, first touching the metal railing of the bed, then the white floor, and finally the wall beside my sister's pillow. The nurses said the room was one of the quieter ones in the building. That was why they moved her there after the 2nd week. I learned the routine quickly. Morning vitals at 6, medication at 7, doctor rounds sometime between 8 and 9, depending on how crowded the ward was that day. I usually arrived before the first nurse. The security guard at the entrance stopped asking for my name after the first few days. Eventually, he just nodded when he saw me walk in with the same bag and the same coffee in my hand. Inside the room, everything moved slowly. Machines hummed. Air moved through the vents with a low, steady sound. My sister slept often, but not deeply. When she opened her eyes, she always looked first toward the window, then she looked for me. Most mornings, she smiled when she saw me sitting there. It was a quiet kind of smile, not big, just enough to show she was still trying to keep things normal. "How long have you been here?" she would ask. "Not long," I usually said. Sometimes that was true. Sometimes it was. I kept a notebook in my bag. Nothing dramatic, just small things the doctors mentioned. Medication changes, times for tests, names of nurses. The staff seemed to appreciate that. One of the nurses told me I was easier to work with than most family members. "You listen," she said once, adjusting the IV line carefully. "A lot of people don't." Listening was easier than talking. Talking meant explaining things my sister did not need to hear yet. For the first few weeks, our parents called often, usually in the evening. The calls were polite, structured, almost careful. My mother asked questions about the doctors. She asked about the medication schedule. She asked about the test results. My father mostly listened. Occasionally, he would ask about the hospital bills, not aggressively, just directly. "How much did today cost? Did the insurance approve the next procedure?" I answered everything the way I always had, calmly, clearly. They lived several hours away in another city. Visiting was not easy, they explained. Work schedules were complicated. Travel was difficult during the week. I understood that. At least I told myself I did. My sister understood it even more. Whenever the calls ended, she would defend them before I even said anything. "They're trying," she would say quietly. "I know," I would answer. Sometimes she asked when they might visit. "Soon," I told her once. I believed that when I said it. At the hospital, people assumed our parents were deeply involved. Doctors often asked, "Have you discussed this with your parents?" I would nod. "Yes." It was easier than explaining the distance. One afternoon, a nurse asked if our parents would attend the next treatment consultation. The meeting involved several specialists. Important decisions would be discussed. "I'll let them know," I said. She smiled kindly. "That would be good. Families should hear these things together." Families. The word sounded simple when people used it. Inside the room, my sister spent a lot of time looking at old photos on her phone. Pictures from years ago, birthdays, trips. One photo appeared often. The 4 of us standing together outside a restaurant. My father's arm around my sister's shoulders. My mother smiling beside her. The picture had been taken years earlier, before hospitals, before appointments, before medical charts filled with numbers and abbreviations. My sister looked at it quietly. "They'll come," she said once, almost to herself. I nodded. "They will." The doctors were careful with their language. They spoke slowly. They explained things twice, but they also watched my face closely when they talked. They seemed to understand that I was the one carrying the information out of those meetings. One evening, after a particularly long consultation, a senior doctor walked with me down the hallway. "You're handling a lot," he said. "I'm managing." He studied me for a moment. "And your parents?" "They know everything." The doctor nodded slowly. "That's good." The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm air from the vents. When I returned to the room, my sister was awake. She looked tired but alert. "What did they say?" she asked. I pulled the chair closer to the bed. "They're adjusting the treatment schedule." "Is that good? It might help." She watched my face carefully. Then she nodded, accepting the answer. A few minutes later, her phone lit up. A message from our mother. "How was today's appointment?" I handed the phone to her. She smiled faintly as she typed back. For a while, everything felt stable. Routine had a strange kind of comfort. Doctors came. Nurses changed shifts. Messages arrived from our parents. And every day my sister believed they would eventually walk through the door. I believed it too, at least in the beginning. Silence is easier to maintain when you still think the story will correct itself. At that time, I still thought it would. I did not yet understand how quiet people can become when they are slowly stepping away. The first change was small enough that I almost ignored it. Our parents stopped calling every evening. At first, it seemed normal. People miss a day. Work runs late. Schedules shift. My sister did not notice immediately. The hospital days blurred together for her. Medication made the hours feel uneven. But I noticed. 3 evenings passed before my mother called again. Her voice sounded the same as always. Calm, organized. She asked about the doctor's notes, the medication adjustments, the results from a blood test that had been done 2 days earlier. I answered everything. She listened carefully. Then she said she had to end the call because she had an early morning meeting. It lasted less than 4 minutes. Afterward, my sister looked at the phone for a moment. "They must be busy," she said. I nodded. "They probably are." The next week, a new treatment plan was scheduled. The doctors wanted to meet with family members, not just by phone, in person. They explained that several options needed careful discussion. It would be easier if everyone was there. I told my parents the date and time during our next call. My mother was quiet for a few seconds. "That's during the week," she said. "Yes. And your father has meetings all day Thursday. The appointment is Friday morning." Another pause. "We'll try to arrange something," she said. The word "try" stayed in my mind longer than the rest of the conversation. I told my sister they were planning to come. She seemed relieved. The hospital had begun to feel like a small world with repeating faces. Nurses rotated shifts. Doctors passed through quickly. Visitors arrived and left for other patients. But no one came for her. When the consultation day arrived, I waited near the entrance for a while before going upstairs. I checked my phone several times. No message. No call. At 9:30, the nurse asked if the rest of the family was coming. "Traffic," I said. At 10 o'clock, the meeting began without them. The doctors spoke carefully. They used diagrams and charts. They explained the possible outcomes of each treatment adjustment. I listened. I took notes. When it ended, the senior doctor asked again, "Will your parents want to speak with us directly?" "I'll send them the details," I said. That afternoon, I called my mother. She answered after several rings. "Oh," she said, sounding slightly surprised. "I thought the meeting was next week." I looked down at the notes in my hand. "No, it was today." Silence. Then she sighed lightly. "Well, you can explain it to us." I did, carefully, step by step. She asked a few questions about costs, about insurance approvals, about whether the hospital recommended the more expensive treatment path. My father spoke briefly in the background, asking something I could not hear clearly. She repeated his question. Will this extend the hospital stay? Yes. Another pause. We'll need to review some things here, she said. The conversation ended soon after. When I returned to my sister's room, she was sitting up slightly, looking toward the door. Did they get here yet? She asked. I placed my notebook back in the bag beside the chair. No, they couldn't make it today. Her expression shifted, but only slightly. Something came up. Yes. She leaned back against the pillow slowly. That's okay, she said. You can tell them everything. I will. Later that evening, she sent them a message herself. I saw the screen light up while I was pouring water into a plastic cup. I missed you guys today. A few minutes passed before the reply came. We'll visit soon. The message looked simple, but something about it felt incomplete. Soon could mean many things, days, weeks, months. My sister read the message again before placing the phone beside her pillow. They're trying, she said softly. I did not answer immediately. Outside the room, a nurse pushed a cart down the hallway. The wheels made a quiet rolling sound against the polished floor. Inside the room, the machines continued their steady rhythm. That night I sat beside the bed long after visiting hours ended. My sister slept. The phone on the tray remained still. No new messages arrived. It was a small thing, just a missed visit. A short phone call. A simple promise that had not yet happened. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that proved anything. But the silence after those conversations felt slightly different than before. Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet space where certainty used to be. And once you notice that kind of silence, it becomes difficult to ignore the next one. After the missed consultation, I began noticing things I had not paid attention to before. Not dramatic things, just small details that did not fit together the way they used to. The first was the messages. Our parents still responded when my sister wrote to them, but their replies became shorter, sometimes only a sentence, occasionally just a few words. Glad the treatment went well. Hope today is easier. Keep us updated. They sounded supportive, but they never asked deeper questions anymore. They did not ask how she felt. They did not ask what the doctors had said in detail. My sister did not seem to notice. She read every message carefully, then placed the phone back on the tray as if it had delivered exactly what she expected. One afternoon, a nurse came into the room with a clipboard. She smiled politely when she saw me. Are your parents planning to visit this week? I hesitated. I'm not sure yet. She looked slightly surprised. We were updating the contact file. The doctor wanted to confirm who will be present for the next review. When is it? Monday morning. I nodded slowly. I'll ask them. After she left, I stepped into the hallway and sent a message to my mother. Doctors want to know if you'll attend Monday's review. The reply came almost an hour later. We'll see. It depends on your father's schedule. That answer felt familiar now. Not no, just uncertainty. Monday arrived the same way the previous appointment had. Quiet. At 9:30, the nurse asked the same question. Will your parents be joining? Probably not, I said this time. The meeting went ahead without them again. When I called my parents later that evening, my father answered for the first time in several days. How did it go? He asked. I explained the treatment adjustments. He listened for a moment, then asked the same question he often asked now. How long will she need to stay? Doctors aren't sure yet. And the new medication, it's covered by insurance. He was silent for a moment. That's good, he said. I waited for him to ask about her condition. He didn't. Instead, he said he had to get back to something. Before hanging up, he added one more sentence. We'll try to come next month. Next month. I repeated those words quietly after the call ended. Inside the room, my sister was watching something on her phone, a cooking video she liked to replay when she felt tired. "They coming?" she asked without looking up. "Maybe next month," she nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Travel is hard during the week." I did not correct her. Few days later, someone else noticed the pattern before I fully allowed myself to. It happened during a late afternoon shift. One of the older nurses stood near the window while adjusting the monitor beside the bed. She had worked in the ward longer than most of the staff. Her movements were calm and practiced. "You've been here every day," she said. "Yes. And your parents live far away." "A few hours." She glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Do they visit on weekends?" "Sometimes," I said. The word left my mouth before I thought about it. She did not challenge the answer, but her expression changed slightly. "I see." After she finished adjusting the machine, she paused beside my chair. "You're doing a good job," she said quietly. "Thank you." She hesitated, as if deciding whether to say something else. Then she left the room. That evening, my sister scrolled through her phone again. The same old photos appeared: family dinners, holiday decorations, a picture of my father teaching her how to drive years earlier. She smiled faintly at that one. "They were so nervous that day," she said. I remembered the moment. My father standing beside the car, giving instructions through the open window. My mother watching from the sidewalk, laughing when the car moved too slowly. Back then, everything felt simple, or maybe we only believed it was. The phone vibrated again in her hand. Another message from our mother: "Busy week here. Hope you're feeling better." My sister typed a reply: "Miss you." Several minutes passed. The reply arrived: "We miss you too." She looked satisfied with that answer. She placed the phone back on the tray. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set, turning the hospital parking lot a dull orange. Inside the room, the machines continued their quiet rhythm. Nothing dramatic had happened. No arguments, no harsh words, just distance. Slow, quiet distance. But patterns become visible when you sit in the same room long enough. And by then, I had started to notice one pattern clearly. Everyone in the hospital expected our parents to appear eventually, but the only people who seemed certain of that were us. By the time the third family consultation passed without them, people at the hospital stopped asking when our parents would arrive. They still mentioned them occasionally, but the tone had changed. Instead of expectation, there was a kind of quiet adjustment, as if the staff had slowly rewritten the situation in their minds. Family member present, me. Decision contact, me. Daily visitor, me. The forms reflected it first. One afternoon, the administrative nurse handed me a clipboard. "Just confirming contact details," she said. I scanned the page. Emergency contact, primary decision maker, billing communication. My name appeared beside several sections. "That should probably stay under my parents," I said. She looked at the page briefly. "We can leave them listed," she replied, "but you're the one we see here every day." I didn't answer. She waited a moment. Then she added quietly, "It just makes things easier." Inside the room, my sister was resting. The window blinds were half closed, letting in narrow lines of afternoon light across the floor. I sat down beside her bed and sent another message to my parents. "Doctors want confirmation about treatment decisions. They asked if you can attend next meeting." The response arrived much faster than usual this time, but it was not from my mother. It was from my father. Why are they asking us again? "You're already there." I stared at the message for a moment before replying, because they expect family to be present for decisions. 3 dots appeared on the screen, then disappeared, then appeared again. His reply came a minute later. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." I read the sentence twice. "I'm just telling you what the doctors asked." Another pause, then his response arrived. "We trust you to handle things." The words looked supportive at first, but the tone felt different. Not trust, distance. I placed the phone on the table beside the bed. My sister stirred slightly, opening her eyes. "Who was that?" she asked. "Dad, what did he say?" "That they trust us." She nodded, satisfied. "That's good." Later that evening, my mother called. Her voice sounded sharper than usual. "I just spoke with your father," she said immediately. "Yes. He says the hospital keeps asking for us." "They do." "Well, that's unnecessary." I leaned back in the chair, looking toward the quiet hallway outside the room. "They just expect family involvement." "You are family," she said. The sentence carried a faint edge now. "I know. So why are you making it sound like we're not doing anything?" The question caught me slightly off guard. "I didn't say that. You keep telling us the hospital is asking where we are." "Because they are." She exhaled slowly. "You're under a lot of stress right now," she said. "It's affecting how you interpret things." I didn't respond. Her voice softened slightly, but the message remained the same. "We're doing everything we can from here. I understand. And we're paying for the treatments." The sentence landed quietly between us, not aggressive, just placed there like a fact that should end the conversation. "Yes," I said. "So I don't understand why you're creating this impression that we're absent." I stared at the floor tiles while she spoke. "I'm not creating anything," I said. "Then stop saying the hospital expects us there." "They do." Another long silence followed. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, not angry, dismissive. "You're getting emotional," she said. "That's normal in these situations." I almost laughed at the simplicity of that explanation. Everything I had noticed, every pattern, every absence, reduced to stress. "You should focus on your sister," she continued. "She doesn't need tension right now." "I agree." "Good," she said. The call ended soon after. Inside the room, the machines continued their steady rhythm. My sister had fallen asleep again. I sat there for a long time without moving. The conversation replayed quietly in my mind, not the words themselves, the structure. Every time I mentioned their absence, the topic shifted. Every time I described what the hospital expected, I became the one misunderstanding. Stress, emotion, overreaction, simple explanations for complicated behavior. A few days later, my sister asked me a question while scrolling through her phone. "Did Mom say when they're coming?" I looked at the screen on the tray. There were messages from earlier that afternoon. "Busy with work this week. Will try soon." I handed the phone to her. She read the messages slowly. Then she smiled faintly. "They're trying," she said again. I nodded. "Yes." But something inside the room had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly enough that no one would notice unless they were paying close attention. Because for the first time, I realized something uncomfortable. Our parents weren't simply delayed. They weren't confused. They weren't overwhelmed. They were explaining their absence very carefully, and every explanation had the same hidden conclusion. If anyone questioned it, the problem wasn't the absence. The problem was the person noticing it. And in their version of the story, that person was me. The truth did not appear all at once. It arrived the way most uncomfortable truths do, in fragments, small pieces of information that did not seem important on their own, but together formed something difficult to ignore. The first piece came from someone who did not realize what they were revealing. It was a Thursday afternoon. My sister had just finished a short physical therapy session and was resting. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the monitoring equipment. A woman appeared at the door. At first I thought she was another nurse, but she hesitated before entering. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Is this Emily's room?" I nodded. "Yes." She stepped inside carefully, holding a small bag of fruit in her hand. "I'm your Aunt Linda," she said, looking at my sister. My sister's face lit up with surprise. Aunt Linda. She had not seen her in years. Family gatherings had become rare long before the hospital. Linda approached the bed slowly and hugged her gently. "I heard you were here," she said. "I was in the city visiting a friend and thought I should stop by." My sister seemed genuinely happy to see her. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation stayed light. Old family memories, stories from years ago. Linda asked gentle questions about the treatment and listened carefully when my sister answered. Then my sister grew tired and closed her eyes for a while. Linda and I stepped into the hallway so she could rest. We stood near the window at the end of the corridor. Linda folded her hands together, watching people pass by. "You've been here with her the whole time?" she asked. "Yes. That must be exhausting. It's manageable." She nodded slowly. Then she said something that caught my attention. "I'm surprised your parents haven't been here much." The sentence hung in the air for a moment. "They've been busy," I said. Linda looked at me with a strange expression, not disbelief, more like hesitation. "Well," she said slowly, "your mother told everyone something a little different." I felt a quiet shift inside my chest. "What did she say?" Linda glanced down the hallway as if making sure no one else was listening. "She said the hospital wasn't allowing many visitors," she explained, "that you preferred to handle things alone." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "I never said that. I assumed there was some kind of medical restriction," Linda said gently. That's how it sounded when she explained it. I leaned against the wall beside the window. "No one stopped them from visiting." Linda studied my face carefully. "I thought that might be the case." We stood there in silence for a few seconds. The hallway lights buzzed softly overhead. Linda spoke again, quieter this time. "Your mother also mentioned that you were very protective of Emily right now." "Protective?" "Yes, she said you didn't want too many people around." I felt the pieces beginning to shift. Small statements, carefully worded explanations, stories that sounded reasonable to people who were not inside this building every day. Linda sighed softly. "Families say strange things when they don't know how to handle illness," she said. "Sometimes they create stories that make things easier." "Easier for who?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I want to show you something," she said. She opened a message thread and turned the screen toward me. It was a group conversation between several relatives. My mother had written a long message 2 weeks earlier. "Emily is very fragile right now. The doctors recommend limiting visitors. Her brother is managing everything at the hospital and prefers to keep the environment calm." I stared at the screen. Linda watched my reaction carefully. "I'm not trying to cause problems," she said quietly. "I just thought you should know what people have been told." I handed the phone back to her. "Thank you." When we returned to the room, my sister was awake again. Linda sat beside her and continued their conversation as if nothing unusual had happened. But something had shifted in my mind. Not anger, something colder. A clearer outline of what had been happening outside these hospital walls. Later that evening, after Linda left, my sister looked thoughtful. "She was surprised Mom and Dad weren't here," she said. "Yes. I told her they've been busy." I nodded slowly. She watched my face for a moment. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," but the word felt heavier than before, because for the first time, there was evidence that our parents' absence was not only physical. They had also been building a version of the story for everyone else. A version where their distance made sense. A version where the hospital had restrictions. A version where I preferred to handle things alone. And if anyone wondered why they weren't standing beside their daughter's hospital bed, the explanation was already waiting for them. Quiet, reasonable, and completely false. My sister lay back against the pillow, looking tired. After a few minutes, she picked up her phone again. Her fingers moved slowly across the screen. "Who are you writing to?" I asked. "Mom," she said. I watched the message appear on the screen. "I wish you were here." She stared at the phone for a long time after sending it. No reply came that night. but something else happened instead. Around midnight, when she thought I was asleep in the chair beside the bed, my sister quietly opened the camera on her phone. She adjusted the pillow behind her back. Then she began recording something. At the time, I did not know exactly what she was saying. I only knew she spoke for a long time. And when she finished, she saved the video carefully before placing the phone back on the tray beside the bed. After my aunt's visit, the story outside the hospital began to make more sense. Not all at once. But slowly, the way a room becomes clearer when the lights come on one by one. The next piece arrived 3 days later. It was early evening. The hallway outside the room was quieter than usual. Most visitors had already left, and the nurses were preparing for the night shift. My phone rang. The number belonged to my cousin Daniel. We had not spoken in months. I stepped into the hallway before answering. "Hey," he said. His voice sounded uncertain. "Hi." There was a brief pause before he spoke again. "I heard about Emily," he said. "I just wanted to check in." "Thank you." Another pause. Then he asked the question that had clearly been building in his mind. "Are they still not letting people visit?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "No," I said calmly. "Visitors are allowed." Silence filled the space between us. "That's strange," Daniel said slowly. "Your mom told everyone the doctors were limiting access." "They're not." He hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't realize." "It's okay." But it wasn't really okay. After the call ended, I stood by the window at the end of the hallway for several minutes. The hospital parking lot below was filled with cars arriving and leaving under the dim lights. Inside the building, everything continued moving in the same careful rhythm. Inside our family, something else was happening. That night, I sent a direct message to my parents. Not about visitors, not about hospital rules, just a simple question. "When are you planning to come?" The response came an hour later from my mother. "We're trying to coordinate schedules." I read the message twice before replying. "It's been 6 weeks. Her answer arrived almost immediately this time. "You know how complicated things are here." The words felt rehearsed, predictable. I decided to be clearer. "Emily is getting worse." Several minutes passed. Then my phone rang. My father. His voice sounded different than usual, more controlled. "Your mother says you're upset," he began. "I'm not upset." "You're implying that we're neglecting something." "I asked when you're coming," he sighed. "We've been discussing this for 6 weeks." His tone sharpened slightly. "You don't understand the pressure we're under here." I leaned against the wall. "What pressure?" "Work, financial planning, logistics." None of those words had anything to do with the hospital room 30 feet away. "The doctors want to speak with you directly," I said. "They can speak with you." "They already do." "That should be enough." The conversation felt like walking through a closed door. Every sentence led back to the same wall. "You're there," he said. "You're handling things." "That's not the point." "What is the point then?" I looked through the glass panel in the door of my sister's room. She was sleeping. The monitor beside her bed blinked slowly. "The point," I said quietly, "is that she's asking for you." Silence followed, longer than before. Then my father said something that settled heavily in my chest. "She understands the situation." "No," I said. "She thinks you're busy." Another pause. "That's not entirely inaccurate," he replied. I did not respond. After a moment, he continued. "You're making this emotional." "I'm describing reality." "You're describing your interpretation of reality." The sentence sounded strangely familiar. The same structure my mother had used earlier: stress, emotion, misinterpretation. The conversation ended without resolution. Inside the room, my sister woke a few minutes later. "You okay?" she asked when she saw my face. "Yes." "Did you talk to them?" "Yes." "What did they say?" "They're trying to figure out schedules." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Her voice sounded tired. The illness had begun taking more from her each week. Her movements were slower now, her breathing more careful. Later that night, when the lights were dimmed and the hallway grew quiet, she picked up her phone again. This time I noticed it immediately. She opened the camera, propped the phone against a glass of water on the tray, and started recording. Her voice was soft but steady. I did not interrupt. She spoke for several minutes, sometimes pausing to breathe, sometimes starting a sentence again when it came out uneven. When she finished, she looked over at me. "You saw that," she said. "Yes. It's just something I wanted to record." "For who?" She hesitated before answering. "For Mom and Dad." I waited. "In case they can't come," she said quietly. The sentence stayed in the room long after she said it. In case they can't come. Not when they arrive, not before they visit, just in case. I nodded slowly. "That's okay." She studied my face for a moment. "You're not mad at them, are you?" No, that answer was true. Anger requires energy. And by that point, something else had replaced it. A colder kind of understanding. Because the more I listened to their explanations, the clearer the pattern became. They weren't simply delayed. They weren't overwhelmed. They were preparing the world to believe they had tried. And the longer they repeated that version of the story, the more difficult it would be to challenge later. But they had overlooked something important. They were building their story in messages, calls, and conversations. My sister had started building something else, a record, and records have a way of surviving explanations. The doctors stopped using hopeful language during the 7th week, not suddenly, just gradually. Their sentences became shorter. Their pauses slightly longer. They spent more time standing quietly beside the bed while studying charts that no longer changed very much. One morning, the senior physician asked if we could speak outside the room. We stood in the same hallway where I had taken so many phone calls. He kept his voice calm. "The treatments are no longer producing the response we hoped for," he said. I nodded. I had already seen the numbers. He continued carefully. "We'll keep her comfortable. But you should be prepared for the possibility that time may be limited." The sentence landed without drama. Hospitals are places where heavy information is delivered quietly. "How limited?" I asked. He hesitated. "Days," he said, "maybe a week, no more than that." I thanked him and returned to the room. My sister was awake, watching the window. The afternoon light had just begun touching the wall beside her bed. "You talked to the doctor," she said. "Yes." She waited. I pulled the chair closer. "They're focusing on keeping you comfortable now." She absorbed the words slowly. Then she nodded. "I figured." There was no panic in her voice, no shock. Illness has a way of preparing people long before anyone speaks the truth out loud. She looked toward the phone on the tray. "Did Mom or Dad message today?" "No." She studied the ceiling for a moment. Then she smiled faintly. "They're probably busy." I did not answer. The silence stretched between us for several seconds. Finally, she spoke again. "I know something feels strange," she said quietly. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "About them." Her voice was calm, not accusing, just observant. "I can see it on your face sometimes," she said. I hesitated. For weeks, I had protected the version of reality she believed. The version where our parents were trying. The version where schedules and distance explained everything. But now the room felt different. Truth often arrives when time runs out. "They've told people the hospital restricted visits," I said slowly. Her eyes shifted toward me. "That's not true." "No." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Why would they say that?" I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer had many possible explanations. None of them kind. Finally, she exhaled softly. "I guess it's easier," she said. "For them." "Yes." Her voice carried no anger, just a tired understanding. She reached for the phone beside her. "Can you help me sit up?" I adjusted the pillows behind her back carefully. Her movements were slower now. Breathing required effort. Once she was comfortable, she opened the camera again, the same way she had several nights earlier. "Are you recording another message?" I asked. "Yes, for them, and for anyone else who might hear their version later." Her voice remained calm. She pressed the record button. For several seconds, she said nothing. Just looked into the camera. Then she began speaking, not loudly, not emotionally, just clearly. "I know you're busy," she said. "I know life is complicated." Her breathing paused briefly before she continued. "But the hospital never stopped you from visiting." She looked down for a moment, then back at the camera. "I waited every week." The room felt very still. The machines beside the bed hummed softly. She continued speaking, not accusing, not angry, just describing what had happened. The empty doorway, the missed consultations, the messages that said soon. When she finished, she lowered the phone slowly. "Can you keep this safe?" she asked. "Yes, in case something happens." "I will." She studied my face carefully. "You're very quiet lately," she said. "I'm thinking." "About them?" "Yes." She reached out weakly and touched my hand. "Don't fight them," she said. "I'm not planning to. They'll explain everything eventually." "I know," she smiled faintly. "And explanations are very powerful." I nodded slowly. "They are." Then she added one more sentence. "But records are stronger." She placed the phone back on the tray and closed her eyes. The evening light had faded from the wall. Inside the room, the quiet rhythm of the machines continued. Outside the room, the world still believed a different story. A story where our parents were concerned but restricted. A story where distance was unavoidable. A story where they had tried. My sister had not shouted. She had not accused anyone. She had simply recorded the truth. And once truth is preserved clearly enough, it does not need to argue with anything. It only needs to exist. My sister died early in the morning. It happened quietly. Hospitals often prepare families for dramatic moments, alarms, rushing staff, urgent decisions. But the reality is usually much calmer than that. The night nurse noticed the change first. Her breathing had slowed sometime after midnight. By 4 in the morning, the room had grown very still. I had been sitting in the chair beside the bed, half awake, listening to the familiar rhythm of the monitors. When the rhythm changed, the nurse stepped closer. She checked the screen. Then she looked at me. There was no alarm, no panic, just a small nod. A doctor arrived a few minutes later. He listened with his stethoscope for longer than necessary. When he finished, he removed it slowly and placed it back in his coat pocket. "I'm very sorry," he said. The sentence felt almost ceremonial. Hospitals say those words many times, but they still matter. The room stayed quiet after that. Nurses moved gently around the bed, disconnecting equipment with careful hands. The machines that had filled the room with sound for weeks slowly went silent. I sat there for a long time, not thinking about anything specific, just observing the quiet. At some point, the administrative nurse returned with a clipboard. "There are a few things we'll need to arrange," she said gently. I nodded. She asked about family notifications. "Would you like us to contact your parents?" "I'll do it," I said. She gave a small nod and left the room again. I looked at the phone on the tray beside the bed. The same phone my sister had used to record her messages. I opened the video folder. There were 3 recordings. The last one had been made only 2 nights earlier. I watched the beginning of it again. Her voice sounded calm, steady, clear. After a moment, I closed the file. Then I sent a message to our parents, just a single sentence. "Emily died this morning." The reply arrived nearly 40 minutes later. From my mother, "We're so sorry." A second message followed. "We'll try to come if we can." I read the sentence slowly. Then I opened the video again. My sister looked directly into the camera. "I waited every week," she had said. The words carried a quiet weight now. I thought about the conversations our parents had been having with relatives, the explanations, the restrictions that never existed, the story they had built carefully over the past weeks. For a moment, I imagined how it would continue, how they might tell people they had planned to visit soon, how circumstances had prevented it, how tragic timing can be. Stories are powerful when no one challenges them, but my sister had already done something unusual. She had not argued. She had recorded. Later that afternoon, I sent one more message, this time not only to our parents, to our Aunt Linda, to Cousin Daniel, and to several relatives who had been included in the group conversation my mother started weeks earlier. The message was simple. Emily recorded something before she died. I think you should see it. Below the sentence, I attached the video file. I did not add any explanation. No accusation, no commentary, just the recording. Then I placed the phone back on the tray. The room was quieter than it had been in weeks. No machines, no steady electronic rhythm. Just the faint sound of air moving through the hospital vents. Messages began arriving on my phone within the hour. Not from my parents, from relatives, short responses. Some confused, some apologetic, some simply silent except for a single sentence. We didn't know. I did not reply to any of them. Outside the window, the afternoon light began fading across the parking lot. Inside the room, nothing moved. Truth does not always arrive with confrontation. Sometimes it appears in a calm voice on a recording. A voice describing events exactly as they happened. No anger, no exaggeration, just reality. And when enough people hear that reality at the same time, explanations begin to collapse on their own. The messages from relatives continued for several days. Not many at once, just a slow stream of quiet reactions. Some people apologized. Others said they wished they had visited. Several simply wrote the same sentence. We didn't know. I believed them. The story they had heard for weeks had sounded reasonable. Hospitals sometimes restrict visitors. Families sometimes choose privacy. Nothing about those explanations had seemed suspicious until they heard my sister's voice. My parents did not call, not that day, not the next. 3 days later, my mother finally sent a message. We watched the video, nothing else followed it. No explanation, no defense, just that single sentence. I read it once and placed the phone on the table. By then, the hospital room had already been cleared. The bed was empty. The machines had been removed. It looked like every other quiet hospital room waiting for the next patient. I walked through it once more before leaving. The chair beside the bed was still there. The same chair where I had spent so many nights listening to the steady rhythm of machines. Now the room held only silence. Outside, the hallway lights hummed softly. Nurses moved between rooms the same way they always had. Life inside the hospital continued with the same calm routine. Somewhere else, our parents were probably trying to explain what had happened, trying to place the events into a version of the story that still made sense. But explanations have limits, especially when the truth exists in a recording that anyone can replay. My sister had not raised her voice. She had not accused anyone. She had simply described the empty doorway she watched every week, and sometimes that is enough, not for revenge. Not for victory, just for something quieter. The moment when silence finally stops protecting the wrong people.